for our next game versus Eastern Illinois. Had a chance to watch them quite a bit. Play some common opponents. They played really well in their opener versus Illinois. It was competitive for most of the game. Got a really tough defensive-minded group, in particular backcourt. They turn people over at a really high rate, which is, as we mentioned after last game, is something we continue to work on with this group. So looking forward to tomorrow night. Gene Brown will not be available. He's still obviously in concussion protocol.
How much of this past week has been about, self-scout, and then how much of it is preparing for Eastern Illinois?
I think, as is the case most always, particularly early in the year, self-scouting becomes really important. And you're trying to evaluate those areas where you need to improve and you need to get better, and you're really focusing, especially when you're 2-3 days out from a game. If you don't clean those up, then eventually you're going to see those surface again. So for us, that's been a significant part of this last 3-4 days, but obviously we've moved into prep for Eastern Illinois.
Tanner was talking about coming from a mid-major and some of these games early in the season, being on the other side of things, going into the big arenas, trying to pull the upset, now being on the other side of being one of those bigger teams. Is it helpful to have a guy that came from the mid-major for these games to not overlook the opponent in terms of his teammates, maybe?
Listen, I don't know if you need a whole lot of help. Look across college basketball right now. I mean, there was 11 alone on opening night. There were 5 or 6 more last night. Florida, TCU, on down the line. Do you need more? Now I get your point. Maybe your players don't follow it as closely as we do as coaches, or maybe even some of you in the media, but some of you in the media probably aren't even aware of how often those scores happen. It's the reality. You got to play. Regardless, you got to play. These are good teams, hungry teams, and you got to play. And we need to play.
Coach, Ryan Peden had a close game against these guys the other day, right? Did you get to talk to him at all about what he saw or scouted with those guys?
Yeah, no, I've talked to Ryan often, and talked to him. I was win number 1 for him. It was a great moment. Really proud of Ryan, and got back-to-back road wins. Had really some travel issues headed to their next game versus Northwestern State, who actually just beat TCU last night. So he's got back-to-back really, really good wins. He's off to a great start, building that program, and love Ryan and Stephanie and Maddox, and just so proud of the start that he's had. So we did talk about him, yeah.
Has he leaned on you as like a resource when he comes up with issues as a head coach for the first time?
We've talked a lot.
When you're talking about all the self-scouting that you do for yourself this time of year, when you have such a young team, do you worry more about about guys not being focused on the right thing and thinking they can overlook a team?
Yeah. Repeat the last part there, Adam.
Do you worry more about that when you have such a young team that could be a factor?
Yeah. Yes and no, Adam. I think yes, in the fact that young players kind of don't know what they don't know. Older players too can just become complacent, or they can get ahead of themselves. If they've had success. So I just think it's the nature of all of us as humans to stay in the moment, stay focused on working. But the reality is the numbers would suggest there are so many good teams, good players in college basketball. And the parity has been real, and it is real.
Do you do you log these games to bring them up with your team? Like, how much do you take note of, like, when Troy beats Florida State and Stetson wins and like Louisville 0-2? Like, do you talk about those things, or is it just more like, guys, we got to take care of our own business?
We'll share specifics. I think just because it drills it home more as a reality. I don't think our players think I'm making things up, but just in case they did, I do want to show them the actual scores at times.
What was it about Tanner that you saw that, okay, he can be a sixth man for us as opposed to starting, or was it not even about him and about other guys that you had in the rotation?
You mean, what was it about Tanner? Why am I bringing him off the bench?
Yeah, I assume it's more than just he's your sixth best player. There must be why he can be that guy for you, do you think?
I think he does give us real, when he's playing well, real energy and pop off the bench, which I like. I also like the fact of having a little bit of an older guy off the bench with so many young kids off the bench. But, no, our starting lineup isn't set in stone. It can certainly be fluid throughout the year.
And when you have these periods early in the season where there are days off like this, as opposed to once you really get going, how do you keep the guys as engaged as they will need to be throughout the rest of the year when, games start coming fast, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's our job as coaches, and I think the reality is kind of what we've spoken about, is you share with them how important it is to control what you can control right now, which really is your preparation in the moment for what you're doing next. And what you're doing next could be practice 3 days out. I did not think we practiced great on Sunday. I made that clear. I didn't feel like I helped them as much as I should have. We practiced better yesterday. We need to have a good one today. I just think as much as possible, I think if you're trying to challenge your team with staying focused on the moment and bringing their very best, to practice, to self-scouting, and yet at the same time you're bringing the realization that if we don't, the outcome will not be to our liking.
Chris, it's still early in the season, but we've seen, some freshmen like Bryce Sensabaugh get significant playing time, in your 2 wins. What have you liked that you've seen from the freshmen just on the court? And, where do you think that, this group of freshmen can take this team?
Oh, I think, I wouldn't want to speculate right now on what can happen, months from now. What I can say right now is these guys through the summer and through the fall have been, had great approaches, great attitudes. They're talented kids. They are going to go through challenging moments and challenging stretches of the season and challenging games. That's going to happen. Trust me, that has already happened in some cases, and it will continue to happen. But I've really been pleased with their approach and their attitude, their work, their consistency, and I think we as a coaching staff feel very good about these 4 guys. We just do, and we've got enough information right now that I think to feel very optimistic about what they can grow into.
And yesterday, to diverge slightly off the path, news broke that former Ohio State captain Jamal Brown passed away. Can you, did you know Jamal at all, and can you describe any sort of impact that he left on this program?
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I was going to wait until the end, but I will go ahead and. It's been really a tough couple days with Jamal Brown, the passing of Jamal Brown, obviously what happened on the campus of University of Virginia. So our condolences and thoughts go out to obviously Jamal's family, as well as what happened at the University of Virginia. As far as Jamal, it hits home because he is he was a young man, and he really, from what I understand, and I don't claim to know everything about his time here, but from what I understand, he was really beloved. Played on some outstanding teams. Played with obviously some tremendous players here, and Fran Fraschilla texted me last night talking about how special that recruiting process was in recruiting Jamal and how special of a person he was. He just seemed to really impact a lot of people, and our thoughts really are with his family, loved ones, his teammates right now as they mourn his loss.
You talked about not being thrilled maybe with Sunday's practice. Was it a case of missing shots or a case of more like attention to detail type of stuff?
I just thought we had stretches where we didn't play as hard as we needed to. Yeah, it was more about that.
When you're at this point of the season with such a new team, how do you address things like that?
Film the next day. Really direct film, direct conversations. I think when they see it, they can see, hey, I'm just not doing my job on this possession and not playing as hard as I need to. You do that enough, you build a habit. Bad habits are hard to break.
You've seen these guys all off season, all through the summer. Now that you have 2 games under your belt, do you feel like you've seen a lot of growth from them as a team, like coming together, or is it still just, pretty similar to what was in the offseason?
I think I've seen growth. I think we've seen growth. I think it's probably a little too early to say a lot of growth because there haven't been enough time yet. But I do think we've seen growth in some areas for our guys. You're hungry for more. I'm hungry to see more.
Talked about line changes a couple times where you just send a whole new set of guys out there. Have you coached a team here? I can't remember one that had this much depth, and how different is that coaching?
Yeah, I think probably our third year's team, which was analytically our best team. I think that probably had as much as depth as any team we've had. So I would probably point to that one. Guys that have followed us closely know that team, and I think that team had across the board a lot of depth.
When you coach a team with depth compared to a different team where you're just 6 or 7 guys?
Coaches will look at it different ways. Some coaches, they don't mind playing 7-8 man rotation. They feel comfortable with that. That's kind of how they've done it, and they've been really successful doing it that way. Some like to play 10 or 11. I'm kind of comfortable in between there at about a 9-man rotation. Some of that depends on the health of your roster. We had to, last year play a little bit less because of our injuries. Guys have been successful doing it really different ways, and some of it's dictated by your style of play, some of it's just dictated by what your team looks like from year to year.
Last one, just how much have you seen yourself have to change your coaching style here with the fact that there's so many new faces and that you're only 2 games in? It's something you haven't really faced.
Yeah, I think just I've got to remember to be patient and yet honest with myself and with our team as we go through the inevitable ups and downs, and yet have a degree of patience, which is never a strong suit for coaches, but it's certainly not a strong suit for me. I'm admitted to that. You can ask my wife. I'm sure she's got her opinions on that as well. So I think those 2 things are going to be required.
Chris, I know this may sound like an obvious question, but how crucial is just a team's confidence in their success?
Yeah, no, I think for a new group and a team, I've said we struggled in our scrimmage. So I think a team that kind of struggled in a scrimmage, it was important to have a little bit of success, but you're not guaranteed. Momentum doesn't often, it can impact a game for sure, and maybe pockets of a season. But I think more than anything, you got to create that from moment to moment, from game to game.
Right, because kind of what I'm getting at here is y'all are taking care of business, taking care of the teams that y'all are supposed to beat. Akron took y'all to the wire last year. Just how crucial is that just with the young, inexperienced team, just to see the ball go through the hoop, especially with this tough stretch coming up here?
I think the most important thing is, are we playing to the standard we've played, and we'll get tested with that tomorrow with what I talked about, their ability to turn you over and force you into difficult plays. So I think, again, that's something we evaluate game by game. I'm certain our guys understand we've got a lot to prove, and tomorrow's another opportunity. Okay, thank you.